Friday. Happy Good Friday. Even the idea that we call this day good is amazing. It is only good because God has died for us, for our salvation. There's so much that we could talk about on this busy day of Jesus' Holy Week. This is the day he goes from being arrested to tried and to crucified and to buried. And there's so much we could talk about, from the denial of Peter to the suicide and guilt and shame of Judas. We could talk about the beatings. We could talk about Herod. We could talk about Pilate. We could talk about Pilate believing that washing his hands symbolically meant he was no longer responsible for the death of Jesus. What I want to talk about is the cross and then some implications from the cross. The cross was created, or the crucifixion was created by the Persians, but it was perfected by the Romans. And it has had lasting impact. I don't know if you know or not, but we still use reference points to the crucifixion. That's how impactful the crucifixion was back then, that it still has a place in our vocabulary today. The word excruciating is a word that means from the cross. So if you say I have an excruciating migraine, you're saying this migraine is as if I'm being crucified. It's become a litmus test of suffering, and it was everywhere. We don't really have a place for this, but a category for this, but crucifixions were everywhere. They were very common, and people would have seen them constantly. In fact, Jesus would have seen hundreds of people in his lifetime crucified, maybe coming in and out of Jerusalem or traveling in some of the other cities he traveled. There would have been crucifixions. Every one of them a reminder of his own destination. We were told that the day that Herod the Great died, they crucified 2,000 people. Spartacus at one point crucified 6,000 people in one day, and it lined 120 miles of road. And that's exactly how crucifixions were. They were public, and they were at eye level. We have this idea that a cross was way up here and people would look up, but in fact they were often just along the road, and that they were eye level. And it was a slow, humiliating death of asphyxiation. The lungs would fill with liquid, the heart and the surrounding tissues would fill with liquid, which is why when Jesus was pierced in the side to make sure he's dead, water and blood flowed separately, because he suffocated on the liquid that it was in his lungs. It would take for days at times for people to die. At eye level, naked, exposed to the elements, to the bright warmth of the sun of the day, and fighting the bitter chill of the night, while totally exposed, fighting for every breath. And it was at eye level so that those who you harmed for the reason that you were being crucified, they could come and they could mock you and beat you and hit you and spit at you, throw rocks at you. And it says that Jesus was silent. This was to mark the big difference between others who were crucified, because as their accusers would come and throw rocks and berate them, so the crucified ones would berate in return. Obscenities, mocking, yelling, but Jesus remained silent, except for the several things that the Bible's recorded for us that Jesus said on the cross. The crucifixion that Jesus endured was horrific, and yet in light of that horrific crucifixion, Jesus used his words sparingly, not to condemn or to shame or to hurt or to fire back, but to show his actual nature and his true purpose. And for the next couple of minutes, I just want to look at the things that Jesus said. And the crucifixion and what Jesus said while he was on the cross is recorded in all four Gospels. It's recorded in different fragments and segments, and some tell us some parts of what Jesus said, and some tell us others. And I want to just walk through the order of what Jesus said on the cross. The very first thing comes out of Luke chapter 23, and the soldiers just crucified Jesus. And then Jesus says Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Here's the soldiers nailing Jesus' feet and wrists. The same soldiers that mocked him, the hard-hearted, jaded soldiers who have crucified thousands upon thousands of people, who have no mercy for prisoners anymore. Jesus says to them, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That amazing moment of clarity about our sin. We think our sin is just about us. Maybe we even think our sin has hurt somebody else. We've lied when we've hurt somebody else, or we've gossiped and we've hurt somebody else. But the extent of our sin is far greater. And the reality is the soldiers are crucifying Jesus, but they have no idea what they're really doing. They have no idea they're nailing the Son of God up to a cross. They have no idea that they're degrading the value of the infinite worth of God. And so it is with our sin. We have no idea that when we sin and we elevate ourselves, we exalt ourselves, we trust in our self-righteousness, we manipulate situations, we talk poorly about people, we love ourselves way more than we would love anybody else. It's beyond just that. What we're doing is we're degrading the infinite worth of Jesus by degrading his word and his worth and what he's asked of us and what he's worthy of. And Jesus says to us, I forgive you. You don't even know what you're doing when you choose to do that thing. The next thing that Jesus says on the cross also comes out of Luke chapter 23. And the thieves that are crucified with him begin to argue about who Jesus is and what they deserve and what Jesus deserves. And ultimately, one of the thieves says, remember me today, which is another way of saying, I put my faith in you, I put my trust in you. You are the Son of God, perfect and sinless. And Jesus says to him, today you will be with me in paradise. That is so powerful for two reasons. One, God's grace extends to our very last minute. God's grace is so amazing. This man, he knew nothing of God, gave no glory and honor to God, and yet in his dying hours gave his life to Jesus, and he was received into paradise. The grace of God is so good. Don't ever give up on people that we know who have not yet met Jesus, because the grace still stands. But then secondly, what I love about the thief is the thief had no chance to be a mature Christian. The thief had no opportunity. It goes to show us that the faith of Jesus and the faith of Jesus alone, not our works, is what saves us. The thief was never baptized. The thief never went to a church. The thief never grew in his faith. The thief never became a mature Christian. The thief never knew the catechisms. The thief never had any more theology other than, this is the Son of God. He can forgive me. Remember me today as you go into paradise. The thief distills every one of our works to it's faith in Jesus and nothing else. Then we go to John. John gives us these two moments where the next thing that Jesus says on the cross is he looks out and he sees his mother Mary, who's now going to be a widow. And if you were a widow, you became dependent on your son for your inheritance and for your security. And for the ability to make money and buy groceries and all of that. Well, now Jesus is dying, and Mary's going to be left alone. Joseph's been dead for some time, so Mary's a widow, and Jesus is leaving her. And so then Jesus turns to John, the disciple that he loves. He says, John, meet your mom. And he says to his mother, Mother, meet your son. And this moment is a moment in which Jesus begins to establish the family of the church. And that there's something more deep and rich than our blood family, but it's our church family. And all of a sudden now mothers who have no sons have sons and daughters in the church. And sons and daughters who have no mothers have mothers in the church. And all of a sudden every mother becomes a mother I want to take care of, because that's how the church works. We become the security net for one another. And Jesus loves his mom from the cross. And then Jesus says, and this is in the next section of John chapter 19, Jesus says, I thirst. He becomes thirsty. And maybe he really was thirsty, obviously. But it says that he said this in order to fulfill the prophecy. And it's a reference to Psalm chapter 69. And there's a reference in Psalm chapter 69 about drinking poison, about being poisoned. And it says that Jesus said the phrase, I'm thirsty, just to fulfill this prophecy that he would receive poisoned wine, which he did, so that, again, one more glimpse that Jesus is fulfilling the Bible here, fulfilling the whole story of God here, that he was even willing to say, I thirst, just to fulfill that prophecy, the intentionality and the wantingness of Jesus to complete everything he's been sent to do. And then his last words, which we have through every one of the Gospels, but in different segments. In Luke, his last words are, Father, or in Matthew, his last words are, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? We know Jesus didn't descend to hell, but this is the moment he experienced the fullness of hell, the complete separation between God and the Son. The Trinity has been broken relationally for the first time in all of eternity. Then we're told in Luke that he says, today, Father, I commit my spirit into your hands. Again, we're reminded that I didn't kill Jesus and you didn't kill Jesus. Jesus gave himself willingly. And then in John, we're told the famous line, it is finished. Now, Jesus probably said all of these segments as part of his dying breath. But the last one, it is finished. This was the statement in which both heaven and hell went silent. Heaven went silent because God actually died for creation, for his people, made in his image. Hell went silent because Jesus has finished any opportunity for victory for the devil and his works. It is finished. God has given us salvation and the forgiveness of sins. It is Good Friday. Have a great Good Friday.